Happy Thursday. There's an old saying in my profession, at least, that someone has quit preaching and gone to meddling. That's usually when our toes get stepped on, or frankly, sometimes when the preacher talks about something we'd really rather not talk about. But anyway, we read the Sermon on the Mount, and there's a lot of meddling. I mean, Jesus really is clear and direct, and as we witnessed last week, if you were able to be there, the passage that we read in Matthew 5, basically 21 through 37, I think it was, just full of short, brief things that we hear that we kind of go, wow, he's really in my life right now. Meddling is not really what's going on. It's loving, and it's also directing and guiding us to a better place. So this Sunday, when you come, Matthew 6, verses 1 through 4 is where we will camp. It's brief. His words are brief, as they usually are. And he's talking about money. And that one usually goes over real big on Sundays when the preacher begins to talk about money. But in all seriousness, it's also talking more about not just our money, but the spiritual depth that should go with the way that we perceive money. And that he is assuming that his followers will see money as a gift, will see the poor, will give to the poor above their normal gifts, and understand that to be the will of God. Now remember, this whole sermon is Jesus trying to move us along in living a kingdom life, a life of following God, that we would move in the same direction of the law, but also fulfill it even deeper. Every day, deeper and deeper, understanding not just law, but the will of God in that law. What is his intention? We've said a lot. So without preaching the whole sermon, a few tips for you to get ready in reading. You'll notice when you read chapter 6, 1 through 4, Jesus assumes these things with the language he uses. He assumes that his hearers know the poor. They are poor, so many of them. It was a poor country, a poor people, an oppressed people. So it's not hard for Jesus to assume that someone there was poor and knew someone else that was poor. There's some depth to that in our generation, I think. Would Jesus assume the same for us, that we would know the poor? Sometimes it's real good for us to rub elbows and identify the poor by name, not as a caricature, not let somebody else sum up the socioeconomic class, but to look someone in the eyes who is poor and to know them. I'm afraid sometimes in our culture, most of us cannot name many people who are poor. And if that's the case, I think Sunday, if nothing else, will help us to look a little deeper in our hearts and not only think about, but work at finding ways we can rub elbows with the poor as children of God. Another thing he assumes is that those gathered around him, especially Jewish listeners, are giving alms. What that basically means in that culture is not just giving their gift to the temple, which is required of the good Jew, but also to give something beyond that gift to the poor. Now, that would mean in Jesus' hearing that day that a lot of poor people were expected to give of their living to the temple and also to give a bit above that in almsgiving or to the poor. It's fascinating that Jesus expects that. And then the rest of the 4 verses help us with some of the spiritual wherewithal to do that. Where does, the old term would strike me, where does the piety come? Where does our holiness come from that would enable us to live like that? Well, I hope that doesn't scare you off. You come, bring your checkbook. We won't get it. We'll let you think about it, and perhaps think about it in holy ways as Jesus helps us talk about all of us using our money. Have a blessed week. Maybe this rain will go away, and I hope to see you on Sunday.